Hello, parents. I am here to help you understand your CAT4 scores. Now, CAT4 is something that we've been doing for a long time at the school, and it's a test that is mandatory through KHDA. However, this year we're hoping to help guide you in understanding your child's scores so you can kind of understand how we track your child through their data, ensuring that they have progress. So what you're going to do is you should have emailed studentinfo@naschool.ae, and we will generate a report for you in about 4 days. It takes that long to make sure we have the correct information. What we've decided to do is actually generate the teacher report for you and not the parent report. The teacher report gives a little bit more pertinent information, and I think as a parent, you would really appreciate that. So I'm going to explain to you how to do this individual student report for teachers, but to read it so it can help you understand what your child needs and what they're good at. Now, one thing that we've talked about a lot is the superpowers at our school. And so when you first open up the page on page 2, it just breaks down what is CAT4. Now, I've done other videos, and if you look up here at the link, you can probably see where you can tag the videos where I talk about what is CAT4 to our kids and what is CAT4 to our students so we can have a better understanding. I want you to know it's not a test you can pass. It's a test that really tracks your abilities. But students are really tested in about 4 different areas. So these pages on page 2 and page 3 break down the test. Now you have verbal reasoning, and these are some of the questions that you see with verbal reasoning. It gives you a word, and it asks you to create another word or something that goes with it, your anthologies and different things like that. The second part of the test is a quantitative or numerical reasoning, where you have to do the same type of thinking, but instead of thinking with words, you're thinking with numbers. If you go, there's another piece where it's the non-verbal testing, and if you see here, they're doing the same thinking, but they're doing it with shapes and matrices and figures. And then the last one looks like figures, but it's really focused on a 3D concept, which means that you're thinking with shape and you're thinking with space. So all students receive all 4 areas, and they just work through on the best of their ability to get an understanding, and then we come up with the CAT4 concept. So why do we use CAT4? One, it is mandatory here in the UAE, but basically we're looking at it to figure out abilities, and that's what this page is talking about. So we're trying to figure out, do we need to build verbal reasoning through reading, comprehension, and vocabulary, or are we going to be able to do more quantitative, which is numbers and step by step? Now, this will all tell you why we use the CAT4, but this is what I want you to start understanding, and that's the relationship of the score. So we have something called Stat 9, which is between 1 and 9. And then you have your standard age score, because we do track the student's age and the grade level with their score. So it starts at 70, but it goes all the way up to 130. Now, if you see Stat 9 here, it's broken up into 9 blocks. Those 9 blocks are broken into 5 very important categories: our very low, our below average, our above average, and our very high. If a student is average, that means, if you look down here, they score between a 90 and a 110, and that is good. So any score between 90 and 110 means that your child is right on track to where they're supposed to be. If they're below that, in the below average, that means that we definitely need to seek intervention, and we're trying to make sure that we don't get caught with learning confusion or fundamental help that can really be beneficial. And if they're very low, we're definitely working with our SEND or SPED department to make sure that we're closing gaps, because their ability to understand is kind of paused or frayed. When we talk about above average and very high, we're talking about our students that are gifted and talented, or they might have a special, unique field. Down here is your national percentage ranking. And it just kind of talks to you, and I'll show you in the next screen, about what's the percentile that your child has scored in. That they're doing better than 20% of all the students who have taken the exam. They're doing better than 80% of all the students that have taken the exam. And these percentages are based upon their age and their grade again. So it kind of looks exactly on their factor of who their age has taken this exam and scored in this place. That's our numbers. So then you're going to get this as well, where it talks in detail about understanding the report. So the battery is the 4 different levels or different types of questions: your verbal, your quantitative, your nonverbal, your spatial. This is the number of questions attempted. So it will tell you exactly if they did every question or did they skip around. Now your SAS, which is up here, is in this battery, your child scored this amount. So this child here in verbal scored a 95. But if you notice in nonverbal, they scored a 115. So that means that we know that this child is partial to struggling with verbal instructions or verbal type of learning, but they do well with nonverbal, which is your models and your figures, and even better with spatial. So that's what this part means. Then you have your NPR, which is your national percentage rank. So here when they scored 95, they ranked better than 37% of students who were their age who took that test. However, in spatial, they were better than 86%. So it kind of tells us where you are learning, and when it goes back to abilities, where each one lies. Here you have your mean, and this is what your overall is. And so that's what happens when they're all averaged together. So over here, your SAS is the same as here, except it kind of now gives you where it falls and kind of where does it lie within that average of 90 to 110. So all of this gives you an idea here, and you will receive this paper so you can read along and understand. So here we have a sample of a student, and here they scored for their verbal a 104, their quantitative a 118, nonverbal 113, spatial 98. So they have a total mean of 108. And then you see here, it tells you that they did not complete all of the questions, so they took their averages based upon that piece. Quantitative, nonverbal, spatial, the same thing. Now, when you look over here, you kind of see with the band. In verbal, they scored right in with the average of what you should score. But in quantitative, they actually scored above, almost in that gifted area. And then we look at mean, we look at that. So this is where it gets really interesting and why we chose to go with the teacher reports instead of just the parent report. This gives you the profile of where they fall with extreme verbal bias or extreme spatial bias. This just kind of shows you where does your child lie. This child has no bias. That means they're an even learner. They learn pretty much in every way. But in some kids, if you land here on this red, that means that you really, really do well with verbal understanding, that you can talk and they can understand. But that means they're also opposite of spatial, which means they would struggle with models in space and those 3D concepts. So while this kind of shows that information, what we really like is here. What we talk about now is the profiles, and CAT4 will tell you that this is a balanced profile. This shows an average to high average range, and it's going to list your child's name, and it's going to tell you they are going to be secure in which type of areas and what type of learning. So if you're doing outside tutoring or different things to help build them, it's going to help you understand that this is where my child rather learn. This is where their strong points are. It's going to also say they like modeling, demonstrating simulations, written material, responding to different variety of teaching and learning. And it also will tell you, based upon this information, which subjects they should do well in And what you should automatically know is the opposite. So if this person's doing well in science, design, technology, and geography, and then I go back to their score and I saw they struggled in verbal, I know that they might need help, especially in spatial, but with English and language arts, but especially the English when you have to imagine reading or you have to do your comprehension, excuse me for that, and especially when it's asking for inferencing and prediction, because those are all mental activities. So I'm going back, sorry. So this information gives you exactly the implications for teaching and learning. And this is what teachers use to help understand what might be better for your child. But the other piece of it is, what do they have to work on? So sometimes we will teach them opposite of their skill set because we want them to be, and here's your key word, challenged. So here's your probability of your student. For this student here, this is math. There's a 94% chance that their child is going to be able to understand math very well based upon your test scores. If you do a challenge, if you try to work at a greater depth, that you'll be able to achieve even a higher score. So if they're working or doing that practice time, if they're continuing an exact path, it's basically a prediction of where they can and cannot go and what they can do and where their scores can be, but how to strengthen them. So that is pretty much it. There's no prediction for science and there's no prediction for writing. It's really just focusing on these three concepts, but it does talk about being able to close the gaps and being able to achieve. So this is your CAT4 report, and you will receive an email on how you can turn around and request your child's CAT4 report. Even if you did not test this year, if your child has taken the CAT4 before at their school, you can request for their score because we will have it on file. I hope that this information has truly helped you out just a little bit in understanding CAT4 and really how we utilize it to show progress and growth, because that's what we're dedicated to doing. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time, and I will talk to you later.